This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 12. Ronell Smith. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 12 of Experts in the Wire. I have Ronell Smith on the line today. He's going to teach us all about how any company can leverage user-generated content, how Moz improved their acceptance rate from 3% to 25%, and what Starbucks really sells. Don't forget to subscribe in the iTunes Store and now Google Play. That's right, Google has launched their podcasts in Google Play. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my discussion with Ronell Smith. Can you just give us a quick background on your content marketing and marketing career? Tell us just briefly kind of how you got into it and what you're up to now.
Okay. I kind of backed into I kind of backed into content marketing, online marketing. I've always been in the communications, PR, branding, product strategy side of things. And my previous job was was director for a magazine. I was editor for a magazine, business magazine for ESPN. That magazine was sold off. I had a chance to stay with the company, but I didn't want to move to Bristol, Connecticut. And I'd always wanted to be a consultant. And my wife said, this is your chance. Why don't you just go for it? I had a ton of jobs. My plan was to go from that job to start my own PR firm. But right around 2010, the online world was just popping off, and I learned about SEO. And so in 2011, I started doing some product strategy consulting for a lot of outdoor brands, some small businesses who wanted to know more about online marketing. So I just immersed myself in the world of online marketing, SEO, in late 2010, early 2011, started my own website, had an online newsletter. And I really realized the benefit of quote unquote business strategy with content strategy, because content was so important. And so for the last 4 years, I've been content strategist, business strategist, working with brands from small cupcake shops all the way up to $2.5 billion businesses. It's fun, it's exciting, and it's needed. So it really is kind of right in my wheelhouse. I really enjoy it.
Awesome. That background is so similar to so many other people that are in SEO and online marketing. Like you said, I love how you described it as you kind of backed into it. Like you didn't plan on it, but it just kind of happened and you followed your passion with it. So that's awesome. And we're also both Moz associates.
Yeah.
How long have you been a Moz associate?
I've been a Moz associate since late 2014. Once I did 11-month stint at an agency, which was it was one of the biggest and certainly most successful agencies here in Dallas. And I really enjoyed it because I learned a lot as far as what my skill set is and how to marry that with the needs of the client. I didn't enjoy the relationship between content, SEO, and paid media. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about tearing down the walls of, because I see so many things, so many holes, so to speak, in the industry as far as here's what they need, here's what we're serving them, here's what we're good at. And there's just a bunch of different disconnects. And I'm not saying I'm the person to fill those voids, but it's been interesting to see where they exist.
I agree. Breaking down those walls and barriers has been an area of, I think, achieving success beyond just staying in your own little world. And I totally agree. So are you mainly like a independent consultant as in addition to Moz associate?
I do. I right now, Moz is my biggest client. I run their user-generated content site, YouMoz. I do a bunch of different things for them. Moz has been fabulous because whether from Rand or working with Sarah or the community team or the product team, they've really, when I came aboard, I said I wanted to have my hands in all the pots. And they've been really great for us, providing insight to the leadership team. Not that they need it, but just bouncing ideas off of Sarah, the CEO, or talking to Rand, the community team. It's just been a wonderful experience for me to be able to manage something. And I love the user-generated content side of things because I'm helping authors. And part of my passion is being able to train brands how to produce their own content. And I get a lot of pushback from that from other consultants because they're like, oh, you're basically trying to take our work. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to take your work. But what I am doing is many brands, when they trust people to, when they're content to outsource their content, that means they typically don't know what content themselves best works for their brand. And so I don't believe in somebody spoon feeding me what it is I need. I need to have some insight into what it is that I need, even if I can't produce it. And so my job, what I'm really passionate about, is training people, know your audience well enough to know that if somebody's producing your content, this is what it should look like. This is what it should feel like. This is how it should perform. If not, you're kind of blindly trusting people. And that, if somebody, say that consultant or that agency walks away at some point, you're really kind of left out in the cold. And that's what I don't want.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump into some specifics. So one thing that I like to tell all my guests here is that my goal is to bring experts like yourself on the show to deliver really tangible tips and tactics and strategies to the listeners, because my hope is the listeners are not only marketers and SEOs like you and I, but also maybe the business owners or the people that manage blogs for their company. So I want to jump into talking about YouMoz a little. So YouMoz is user-generated. It's a community-generated content blog for Moz. And, I'm familiar with the submission process. So basically, people can submit content to YouMoz, and it goes through a very strict editorial process. And then the ones that are approved, they get posted to the user-generated blog. And then if they do really well, as kind of judged by the community, they can get promoted up to the main blog. Correct. Which provides huge visibility. So I just want to kind of give that overview of what YouMoz was. But do you think that other brands can successfully replicate a community-generated blog that like Moz has done? Absolutely.
It's funny because when I first started working with Moz, we just kind of bounced some ideas. Jen, the person I report to, was phenomenal in saying, whatever it is you want to do, we'll find a way for you to do that. And I wasn't that familiar with YouMoz. I mainly read the main blog, but it kind of was right in my wheelhouse because one of the biggest projects I took on with the agency was a very successful e-com brand was starting a smaller e-com brand that they were looking at for a different business customer. It was a B2B. And so they were saying, okay, this is for the giant businesses. This is for the small businesses or the homeowner or the college kid or the person that was moving. And I got to revamp that e-com site. And part of the process was that they were going to have a user-generated content page that people could upload their content that highlight. It was a box company that would highlight what they were doing specifically with these boxes. Because what happens when a company, when a person or a company moves, they have all these boxes lying around, and it's prohibitively expensive to recycle all the boxes. And so people were doing creative things with them. They were donating to these schools or donating to these agencies that were then doing these funky designs on them that they could create and sell. And I was charged with coming up with ideas for what that would look like. And so now with YouMoz, it's helping people become better at what it is that they do. So I'm not opening up a door that, for example, primarily it's text, but it could be an amazing video if somebody submits it. It could be, it could be an amazing podcast. It can be an amazing infographic. The thing I want to share to people who provide content for YouMoz is I'm not trying to make you into a writer, but if text is the format you choose, then there's standards for that. The same thing for video or for a podcast, audio. But what I love about it is this is their site. And I want to open the door and say, hey, listen, this is the vehicle, but you can choose the medium. Don't feel like you're hidebound the text. And so what's been phenomenal is when I took over YouMoz, we had a less than 3% acceptance rate. So of the thousands of pieces of content we receive every year, hundreds per day, it was a small fraction that was received. And so it was really tough for me to say to all these people, rejection, 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 rejection. But I wanted to train people to, this is what the expectations are. They aren't going to change, but if you're willing to allow us to work with you, things will get better and you'll likely get a piece of content on the site. What's interesting now is our acceptance rate is probably up around 25 to 35%. So around 30%. Now that means our submittal rate is very low. Our submittal rate, we may get 30 posts a day. Of those, 3 to 5 have a chance of making it to the blog. Of those 3 to 5, only 1 or 2 of those people will choose to work with us to, refine and revise the content to get it there. But it's a much easier process. It's much better for the people who want to get content on the site. And so I get to see very early on, who it is I can work with and where they need to go. And they get to see very early on and consistently, because people submit multiple pieces of content usually, what it's going to take. And so many people on the blog now who writing, because we have some frequent contributors to YouMoz, many people on the blog now are people that didn't have a great debut, but chose to work through that process. What's so gratifying to me is some of the people now, some of the new people on the main blog who get to jump right over YouMoz are people I worked with a year ago.
Right.
And that's a very rewarding process. And that's the same thing I like to do with content marketers, even some that aren't my clients, but who may reach out to me through email or through Twitter and say, hey, I have a question for you. I'm working with this agency. So YouMoz has really opened up my mind to the way things can and should be done. And it's been a great test vehicle for what I'm passionate about doing for content marketers in general.
I love it. Yeah, let's pause there for a second on the YouMoz thing. So you mentioned going from 3% to 25% acceptance, despite the overall number of submissions going down. Can you get into anything tactically or technically that moved you in that direction? Because I think for anybody else wanting to do community content, I think they would love to know how to improve that number. Absolutely.
It's very similar to whether you have an agency or a brand. You have to have a goal up front. And I know that sounds very simplistic. When I came aboard, I told Jen, here's what I want to do. And she was very open. And what I want to do is have a set of standards. So I'm the king of the canned email. So I have probably 80 to 85 canned responses that I send to people, and it's for various stages of the conversation. So I'm very explicit with them on what it's going to be like, but I share with them, here's what we're going to be doing. So from a tactical perspective, one of the first things I share with them is, here's where some of the problems are. And this isn't necessarily grammatical, it's structural. One of the things I say, the simpler, the better. By and large, the shorter, the better. Even better, the more technical, the better. Because the ultimate goal for a piece of YouMoz content is to serve the audience in the best form possible. And that basically comes down to how to actionable content. So how to do something and describing it to them in great detail. Well, then you create a problem. When I say describe, most people think very wordy text because it becomes this lengthy process. And then I say, the more depictions, the better. So don't tell me, show me. So if you look at most of the content we're putting up now, it's step-by-step process that uses a lot of screen caps that anybody, no matter how technical the process, anybody can follow. And so that's very, very gratifying. So what happens is I realized the number of submissions had to go down for our percentage to go up.
Right.
And so a lot of people aren't submitting anymore because they realize, I'm not going to be able to get a piece of content there.
So submission comes in and you're actually coaching the people that submit content through the process of improving it, right, moving it to the direction of what Moz wants for your audience.
Right. Well, ultimately what the customer wants, the audience wants.
What the audience wants from Moz. Yeah. Right. That makes total sense. So I had another question where I wanted to go with that. So what would you recommend or what would you say are some common challenges or hurdles that any brand or company wanting to do user-generated content should be aware of when they embark in that process? What are the common challenges?
First of all, you need to have a set of guidelines that everybody is aware of and that you adhere to. One of the problems I see is, and it happened very early on with the e-com brand I work with, was they had a set of standards that weren't very well communicated internally, inside the brand, and externally to the people that they were going to be dealing with. So they would get things in that people felt like this is what we should be submitting. Internally, the brand didn't realize, that this maybe wasn't where they needed to go. Because what you have to realize is when you share content as a content marketer or a platform like YouMoz, whatever you share serves as a model for what will or should come afterward. And so what I was really, really reluctant to do, and thankfully Moz supported this, was as we're quote unquote training people for what we expect, the submissions are going to fall off a cliff. There was a time when our submissions were going down, but our acceptance rate was probably around 1.5–2%.
Wow.
And I remember getting an email from Rand, seeing an email from Rand, and him saying, "I didn't know our submission rate was that low," and he was entirely supportive because he realized where I was trying to take it. So, from there, having a set of definable standards that you can share with everyone, because Moz is very transparent. Our document that we go by, everybody knows what it is, and it's shared externally with the community.
Yeah, let's get real specific about that document, because I know, because I've been in the Moz platform, but so this is a like pages of guidelines, right? It's like a brand guideline. Where does this actually live in Moz?
Okay, so there's a couple of them. There's one that's a Moz post that Carrie Margaret created before she left, and that lives on the main domain. You can go write for Moz, YouMoz, and you'll find that. Another one is the actual spreadsheet of content that's submitted, and people that's been shared very broadly as well. Another is a blog that was written that's a step-by-step guidelines that highlights for people what we're expecting, and then you basically sign it at the bottom. So that's on the main domain as well. It's not hidden from anyone. That main spreadsheet is available to anyone, but it's not shared with everybody. So the ultimate goal there is people get to see where they are in the process and what's expected of them, and what's also being expected of everyone else. What I've learned is, from a community perspective, transparency isn't always your best friend. But what I mean by that is, if you communicate something to everybody, there's always going to be this and it's just broadcast. There's always this expectation that there's exceptions for certain people. Because let's face it, I create a piece of content. I can't be entirely objective when I see somebody else's content goes up and I think mine's as good as theirs. It's not until they reach back out to me and I walk them through step by step where their piece of content was weak based on those specific definable guidelines that they know to adhere by. Do you encounter some resistance early on? Absolutely. But it's no different than when you're an agency website and you say, I need to produce this type of content to get viewers, this type of content to get clients. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got all these viewers, but there's no clients coming in. But if you're just producing client-centric content, you're not going to get very few shares on social media. And so what that customer-centric content does is train say you have a very small team, it trains the people on that team to create content. It kind of creates that content creation mindset. But as you produce more of it, you hopefully get better, but you can also be more strategic. And what I like to say, if you have specific definable goals, you can be strategic from the start, where everything you produce has, quote unquote, baked into it. Is this for clients, or is this for, ultimately build our brand traffic with the audience? Or is this for personal edification? Is it meant just to be funny, just to get pages up on the website? Because there is some training, so to speak, that if you're going to create one piece of content a month, it's an amazing piece of content, and you get the shares, and it's that traditional, well-performing, long-form content, that may not be great for training your team to produce content long-term. So you need some of those smaller pieces to get people up to speed. How that translates to YouMoz is many times people's first piece of content is way too long. It's maybe 5,000 words. And I'll say to them, this isn't going to work, but here's why. And specifically, the most common problem is, instead of telling me just what I need to know or just what the audience need to know, they feel like they need to tell me everything. And in doing so, they tell me nothing because nobody's going to read that. And so after I'm specific with that individual, not with the community overall, they are better equipped to produce the types of content that will make it to the blog. And by and large, a very high percentage, after I've worked with them, will choose to submit content. And then it's amazing. I don't care how bad somebody's content is. If they'll just allow me to work with them, they can get to the blog and very often get to the main blog. I can name a handful of authors now whose first piece of content, by their own admission, was atrocious. But instead of me saying, it's atrocious and it's never going to be on the blog. Here's how we can work on this. Here's how not we can fix this, but here's where we can get to. And I have confidence in them. They've developed confidence in themselves. Now they're not even working with YouMoz. They're on the main blog. They're producing content everywhere. And I've even had authors reach back to me and thank me. And I joke within my head, like, man, don't thank me because you had a long way to go and you did this. And it was 90% you.
Yeah. Now this sounds like it can be a lot of work. It could quickly scale up to be a lot of work for a company. I think YouMoz is posting, I want to say 4 to 5 pieces a week, if I'm correct.
2 to 3
a week. And so how many people does it take at Moz to keep this kind of machine going? Is it just you or is it other people? Like, do you have people reviewing the content and helping out with that? What kind of scale are we talking about?
It's the great thing about the community team is everybody pitching in. I hate to say sit at the head, but I'm the first eyes on a piece of content. So, when it arrives in the queue, I go through and I whittle there's always some spam. And then the pieces of content that are either too thin, too poorly written, or not detailed enough, I immediately refuse those. I send them a nice little note, but I refuse those.
So you personally look at every submission?
Yes.
How many submissions do you receive, like a week or a month?
Let's say there's always 30 to 50 in the queue.
Wow.
I'm always getting that down to 25, and we always usually have around 25 out in various processes of review I'm working with those authors.
But you're kind of the leader. Like you kind of need to be that one person that's running the whole thing.
Right. And the great part about it is I don't have expertise in every area. And as you know, you've seen the emails. If it's something is so far outside my area, or I feel like I can't make an informed decision, then, we have the great associates to go in there and help with that.
Right. If somebody submits something like JavaScript crawling.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. That's not going to be on my plate. So, but then from an editorial perspective, so they basically said, this is accurate and this is worthy from a technical standpoint of going on the blog. Then I make the decision, okay, does this have value editorially? And so that's where I come in. But, I sit over it and then I make those decisions about, first step, does this have value from what I can determine the editorial, not knowing if it has technical viability. And then from there, if you guys, or if an associate, or if I deem it worthy of editorial value, significant editorial value, then it goes to a proofer. I edit it. It goes to a proofer who then does a final review. But that proofer could say, okay, I feel like this is missing, or I could have questions myself. Like, I don't know if these images are quite up to snuff, or I don't know if they go quite in detail there. So they can be a little back and forth there. But we try to move it through as fast as possible. And then, once we make a decision that it's ready to go, then the community team gets involved and they're in charge of the social sharing. We do typically pull a question out and it goes to Moz QA. So we try to provide as much value for a piece of content as we possibly can. And I can say the audience really, really respects that. One of the things that brings people back is to see how hard we work for them once they produce a piece of content.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like you guys do. I mean, I obviously know firsthand you do an exceptional job with user-generated. Now, is user-generated content of any form good for any type of business? I mean, what if you're a dentist or a pizza shop, or what if you're an e-commerce store selling products online? Like, can this apply to any type of company?
I can't think of a single business that I wouldn't recommend it to. I've heard people say specifically, I spoke at a conference 2 months ago, and this young lady comes up to me and she says, my dentist is one of the most successful in the area, but he's losing out to these other dentists. And you mentioned user-generated content. I don't think we can do that. And I gave her some examples. Absolutely. For example, one of the biggest impediments, even for successful dentists, is the preventative maintenance thing, right? So you have a lot of kids in your area. You want to get them in. You want to get the enamel on their teeth, to the coating on their enamel to protect it. But then you may have a lot of people, older people in your area, who might, what? I don't know what else I should be doing for my teeth. I don't really have any cavities. I go in for preventative maintenance 3 to 4 times a week. What can get them in more consistently? And then there's always a sizable percentage of people who never go to dentists unless something's absolutely wrong. So they're kind of in that middle. They should be doing preventative maintenance. They never have. And so they're really squeamish about coming in. So the biggest question they have is how painful is it going to be? Right. And so you could have people who agree to shoot Facebook video, iPhone video while they're in the chair of them getting a shot, right? Just them holding the camera or them having a family member hold the camera up. He's giving me a shot. He's doing this to a tooth or whatever. The very things that people should be coming in for that you could be missing out on potential clients because of, that user-generated content becomes a driver. I'm not just web traffic, because that could be an interesting enough video that it becomes viral in your area. Say it's a very significant person. It's a politician. He goes to so-and-so dentist, or she goes to so-and-so dentist. Those types of user-generated content, because you look at from a local perspective, this a million times better than I am. People think globally, but they act locally. That's the old slogan, right? But when you think about local content, when you see a family member or a person in your neighborhood going to so-and-so business, was a pizza shop, an ice cream parlor, or dentist or doctor, you're like, you know what? My tooth's been feeling funny lately. I should talk to them about that. And then you go to their Instagram page and they have a really cool video they've shot, or they go to their Facebook page and people are talking about it. Wouldn't you not want to go to that business? Because it makes that dentist seem really, really cool. I've worked with some attorneys. I've worked with some plumbers that have done just that. They've used user-generated content to become major drivers. They were spending tons of money on, say, paid. They realized that they wanted more local traffic. They wanted more significant traffic, higher conversions. And a way to do that was to get the people in the area to talk about that business. Right. And so they, instead of just showing them, they had people shoot videos of themselves that they then offered prizes around and posted it to their website.
And so one thing I'm getting from this that I think I want everybody to take away from, especially the business owners, user-generated content doesn't, like you said before, it doesn't just have to be text, and it doesn't just have to go on your website.
Absolutely.
It can go on your social platforms as well. So I want everyone listening to be open-minded with that. And you don't have to run a user-generated blog, but you can run a user-generated social media account or partially generated social media account. So I think those are all excellent tips and pieces of advice for people wanting to get into it. Are there any other major considerations that a brand, large to small, should consider when wanting to embark on user-generated content?
Yes. The single biggest one, and this is the biggest mistake, is that it does not have to be brand driven. One of the things people immediately want to do, but we're seeing more and more examples of how successful you can be without doing it. Last week we saw something really simple that was significant. I think it was BMW celebrated their 100th anniversary, and Mercedes-Benz tweeted out "Happy Birthday, Competitor" or something like that. I didn't even know it was BMW's anniversary, but because Mercedes-Benz did that, I all of a sudden now think higher of Mercedes-Benz. So what's happening is when people create user-generated content, they feel like, you know what, my brand needs to be attached to it. You can create user-generated content of another brand's happenings, right? Like somebody in your area sponsoring a local air show. You go out and you film the goings on of that, and then you put it on, share it on your social media accounts. You have create a video blog on your website, right? And you talk about, here's what we saw, here's the food we ate, and this was sponsored by so and so. Even if it's a competitor, so it makes people feel better about you, because maybe you aren't in the wheelhouse and that competition is. And it makes it feel like you guys have some sort of symbiotic relationship. It's not so adversarial. So in some small way, you're pulling in your competitors' clients, making them feel better about you, or people who sat on the fence in the middle who didn't have any affiliation. It's like, oh, wow, I thought highly of both of them, or I thought nothing. But all of a sudden, I feel better about this brand because they mentioned the other brand. So, it's those small things that getting away. Another example we saw recently where L'Oreal is making significant headway with non-branded content on their website, where they're talking about competitors' content as shared through images on, say, Instagram, for example. It doesn't have to have your brand. If it's using your domain, it's using your website. I mean, you're the beneficiary of that. You don't have to walk around with your logo. You don't have to have your logo attached to it, because many times people are turned off by that.
Right. Awesome. Ronell, this is awesome. I know I say that word a lot. It's because I'm from Massachusetts. Yeah, I'm from Mass. That's why. Awesome. I listened back to a prior recording, and I think I probably counted 10 times I said that word. So yeah, trying to break that habit. But this has been some great information so far. I want to go through a couple rapid fire questions in the last 10 minutes or so, just to kind of wrap things up. So I noticed somewhere you stated, well, actually, to be honest, my researcher noticed somewhere that you stated, "I don't know," or powerful words. Can you explain that more and how it relates to business?
Absolutely. I learned as a kid that many times people go astray when they're asked something they don't really know, and then they tell the person what they know. So, for example, you ask the directions to this store. I say, I think it's down this way, but I'm not sure. So go down this way. See what I've done? I've led you to where I think to go, not where you need to go. The best thing to say is, I don't know. Let's find out together. Or, you know what? I don't know. So don't trust my judgment. So from a business perspective, and I see this so prevalently in online marketing, and it was one of the things that's always stuck in my craw, is people are sharing advice that is very, very specific, but the person you're sharing it with has no idea how specific it is. So somebody comes to you for content help, and you're like, I've seen this perform very well before for brands in this vertical. And so you lead them down that path. But what you don't tell them is your brand's just different enough that it's probably not going to apply to you. So the better thing to say is, you know what, for your specific company, everybody is unique. Let's discover together what will work through testing. So you begin the process by saying, I don't know what's going to ultimately help you be successful. Every content strategy document I produce, I begin from the premise that I don't know initially before I do my research. And then when I begin, I always have the word iterative in there because I'm going to be testing and tweaking. And if I notice something that I didn't know from the beginning, but should have known working better, I'm going to go with that. Because it's not the case that what I apply now is going to apply 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now.
Yeah, I love that because to me, every marketing situation is a clean slate, and you can't just try to take one solution from one scenario and apply it to another because they're going to be misaligned. They'll be different. So That leads nicely into the second rapid fire question that I have. So you wrote a post on the Moz blog about how to find your brand's disruptive opportunity. It's a great post. I want everyone to go check that out on Moz. We'll link it up in the show notes. But you state specifically in there, set aside 1 hour a week to brainstorm ideas, even far-fetched ones. Can you explain that more?
Absolutely. I think we should be thinking more about our businesses, not just the businesses that we serve or prospects that we hope to have. We should be thinking critically about the business that we're in. And many times, by thinking critically, we'll realize that the business we're in isn't really the business the clients we serve think we're in. The example I like to use is, Starbucks. People think coffee, but Starbucks is one of the largest sellers of sugar in the world. Uh-huh. Starbucks, like Walmart, success is based on location. They don't spend a lot in advertising because there's around 10,000 locations throughout the world, and you'll see some on multiple blocks. Well, that helps them save money because they realize that the choice to buy coffee is location specific, not the taste of coffee. So if Starbucks started themselves as a coffee purveyor, anybody could beat them, but not everybody can be on every block or multiple blocks in the same city. So if you're an agency or you're a content writer or you're a content strategist, you should be spending time each week thinking not just how better can I serve the clients that I have, but what are some opportunities that nobody's taking advantage of that are right in my wheelhouse? Who are people or who are businesses that would benefit from my product or service that I haven't thought about before?
I'm going to give you an example, actually. I don't mean to interrupt, but This sparked an idea. So I had to go see a lawyer yesterday, which, sarcastically speaking, I loved that appointment. But he was talking, this is a trademark lawyer. We were actually trademarking the name of the show. And he was saying, to check these trademarks, I do Google searches to check that. And a light bulb in my head went off. I said, could I maybe do a training session for lawyers on advanced Google search operators? Right? Why not? So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean, that to me is a perfect example of what you're referring to. It's a skill that we have as SEOs, but could be applied in a different scenario.
Well, that's why I love search. I've really come to grips in the last several weeks that I love search. My wife works in big data, and she's had some instruction in artificial intelligence. And we talk about how sexy and how fascinating that is. And she always shares with me insights that she gets to see, she gets to have because she's working around all these, these scientists, just brilliant minds. But I love search because, even with my kids, they're always looking for something. They're always learning something. And the first point of contact is search. My kids are learning to code. They're learning chess, golf, and all this. The place they start is search. And so I've started this saying where I say search is sexy.
I like it.
Because it is. It really is. Just the term to me 2 weeks ago, Dan, and I kid you not, I was like, you know what? I just think everything I do in our community, in our school, with my friends, it's like they ask what I do. And I'm like, I'm not a search scientist, but I'm like, I'm involved in this really cool field that everybody has their hands on without realizing it,
right. Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's like, for example, I was sitting in New Orleans with a couple of friends, and we were talking about what's the population of New Orleans versus Baton Rouge or something. And I started to do the search. I did New Orleans population, and it came up. And then all I did was type like the letters like BA maybe. And Google suggested Baton Rouge population because I had just searched New Orleans population, and it showed me the answer right in search suggest. We're geeking out a little bit here, but my friend I was sitting with doesn't know anything about search or Google, so I kind of got all excited and was showing him like what was going on with Google and stuff. So I absolutely agree. I mean, it touches everything we do. So one last question, and once again, this show has been fantastic. I can't wait till this airs.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're serious about strength training, and so I want to draw a parallel from strength training to maybe business and creativity. So what are some things in-house teams can do to strengthen, see the pun there, their creativity and content creation?
Absolutely. This is something I want to write a blog about. I'm a little too passionate about it to touch it just yet. But, everybody talks about begin with the goal. One of the problems people get lost in, specifically in content marketing, inbound marketing, SEO, is they focus so much on how they think they should get to that goal that they lose sight of that it doesn't need to be a definable process. They don't need to define a process. The process will take care of itself. And what I mean by that is, if I say I need to lose 20 pounds, people immediately say, you need to eat better and exercise. And then an SEO would say, that's not really specific enough. I need a definable goal. And then I say, I want 15% body fat. And so I'm getting more and more specific. And I say, I want to weigh 192 pounds. So I'm getting a little more specific. And then you say, what's that going to enable from a content strategy perspective? And I say, likely long-term success, long-term health, better health as at defining success that way. So what happens is you're defining more of the journey than the process. So as you go about getting towards that body fat or that weight or defining your health, being more healthy, you're making those little small decisions. You're eating more vegetables. You're eating less cake. You're deciding to take in less dessert. You're doing all those things instead of just saying, okay, you know what, specifically, I need to lose weight, right? Or getting too specific, I want to weigh so-and-so without understanding the benefits. The first mistake people make when they want to lose weight is they think in terms of weight, not body fat. So that means they'll meet their goal and then realize, you know what, that's not going to help me be successful. That's a lot like when people come to an agency and say, you know what, I'm no longer ranking for these keywords. And then you go down the path of helping them rank and they say, wow, my conversions aren't going up. And you're like, okay, when you were ranking for those keywords, what were your conversions? Were you successful? Well, no, but I was ranking for those keywords. Well, it's the same thing. If you say I want to weigh 196 pounds, and you don't really care whether it's muscle or fat, you're not going to burn any more calories if you're 196 pounds, but your body fat stays up. So ultimately, being more specific, being very specific about where it is that you want to go, but being less specific about the process that you need to get there. Because sometimes we get bogged down in the minutia, when really it's the goal that we want. The goal is the fat loss. The goal is to not just rank for those keywords, but rank for those money keywords that are going to help a brand be successful, be able to produce the types of content that not just gets links and traffic, but helps conversions. I just think it's very similar. Thank you for asking that question. I've wanted to address something like that for a long time.
Yeah, it really sounds like you should. And we can thank Anthony Penzabene, who's my teammate here, who can.
Oh, you're kidding. I didn't know.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite people.
Oh, really? I'll tell him you said hello. Yeah.
When I was with the agency,
yeah,
he redid some content, did an amazing job, and I love it. And I met him through Twitter. Just amazing. I love that dude. He is so awesome.
Yeah, he's kind of behind the scenes now. He's not really on social much, but talk to him he's full time here, our first full time guy. So I'll give him your thumbs up on the questions.
Yeah, he's so awesome.
That's great. Yeah, so what? I want to quickly wrap that. What I'm getting from that is basically be specific and measure the right thing.
Right.
Yeah, and that applies not only to training but to content. And I love the parallel, and I absolutely think you should do a piece of content like that. So, Ronell, this has been fantastic. I'm going to wrap it up here because I actually, even though my next episode is airing a few days after this, I'm literally doing the phone call in 1 minute. So yeah, I've learned that I need to do a little bit better at scheduling these interviews to leave enough buffer time at the end. But we wrap things up there with Ronell. I hope you found that as valuable as I did. Please go check out the show notes at evolvingseo.com/wire, where you can find all of the episodes with all of the links and show notes. Definitely stick around for episode 13 of Experts in the Wire, where we are going to have Sujan Patel. I think you're going to hear tons of actionable and valuable stuff in that episode with Sujan. And we'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Music by me.